All right, welcome back, everybody. Excited for this time of the month, dude. This is our crossover episode with Getting Past the Premium, Be Extraordinary. I'm here with Brett Young. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. Good to see you, bro.
I always look forward to our conversations, dude.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too.
It's a good time. Well, we were looking to do a little bit different spin. We've talked a lot in the past about culture, about leadership, how do we lead our organizations into the future? But, a lot of that starts with how do we get clients in the door, right? And so we thought we'd kind of focus the conversation today around, all things marketing, sales. I know it's something you guys have been focusing on a ton. I love your perspective on it. And what was the stat you were telling me earlier? It's the last 4 months you guys have, what
Uh,
was the numbers?
we've done some good volume, which has been a good shift, which hopefully maybe we'll get a chance to talk to today because it's been a case study. We're still learning a lot, but the last 4 months we've done about 4 million in sales. So we've hit about 1 million a month in cadence every month, which is the cool thing about this that I'm most proud of is that it's consistent.
Yeah.
It's not in the sales game, we get the yo-yo effect, right? You get
Oh,
the
yeah.
one good month and then you get it's like everything that was in the pipeline came out and then you
Yeah.
have that goose egg. So it's been consistent, which means that it's process driven, which I'm proud of.
Yeah. 100%. Well, you're right. That roller coaster is real. That's something I think everybody needs to think about. And what happens is you prospect a ton, right? Because you don't have anything in the pipeline. You get some stuff in the pipeline. You work all those deals, but you forget to prospect, close a few of those, and then you go down because you don't have any in the pipeline. And you just keep doing that over and over.
Right.
But to your point, good process around all of this and consistent process, I probably should say, is the key to continuing consistent results, right? And ultimately, that's what we're looking for, right? We can track all the conversion and the hit ratios or whatever on your initial meetings, but at the end of the day, it's about results that come in the door. But a lot of folks, I think in our industry, we talk about sales a lot and selling different products and whatever, but ultimately there's a step before that, right? And what I would argue, what we were talking about before we got started too, is, sales is a component of marketing at the end of the day, right? So you got to get out and have people know who you are, what you do, be interested in who you are and what you do before you're ever going to get to selling anything, right?
That is it, man. The best way to articulate, you just said that was fantastic. My brother said something this week that really resonated with me was, you learn if you learn service through a sales lens, right? When you're in the service seat, you're going to have a different perspective because you're trying to learn the sales arm. If you're in the sales seat, you should learn sales through a marketing lens, which now you know how to market,
Yeah.
right? And so I think there's a scale of my opinion. I think marketing is one of the hardest things. It's just it's from a value driven perspective, getting people's attention to potentially want to look at doing business with you is a high level skill set. Most people have a hard time doing it. I'd argue that most people have a hard time being a really good marketer relative to being a quality sales professional. Um, so I think there's a continuum there, but understanding that, you know, you only get the opportunity for sales once you've been, at least competent through the marketing lens. So
Yeah.
understanding that's an extension of that is important because I think a lot of times we just think, well, I'm a salesperson. It's like, well, are you just a salesperson or is sales at the end of the process, right? Like
Yep.
what happened from the talk to somebody, get their attention, compel them to want to talk about more, before you start the sales process. And I think a lot of times that's taken for granted. And I think it should be where we spend a lot more time because it's so important.
Totally agree. I mean, simple example to illustrate this, right, is like a lot of young producers in our industry are taught to cold call, right? Just pick up the phone book. I know that's what it used to be, but get a bunch of names and start calling, right? Which isn't a
Sure.
bad thing, right? I
No,
mean,
which
that's a
I mean,
great way to get opportunities. But the difference is if I call you up and I say, "Hey, Brett, Elliot Bassett, Ella Brock Norris, we do things a little bit differently. Want to tell you or want to get an opportunity at your business," and you've never heard of me, you're probably going to
yeah,
be like, "No, I'm good, man." But if I pick up that same phone call, say the same thing, and four people have told that person about me, or they've seen exactly what we do, what we focus on, he knows I'm an expert in his industry, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be a lot more likely for him to be like, you know what? I'll listen to what you guys are doing. I've heard a lot about you. You do some good stuff. I'll at least give you an opportunity to walk in
Yeah.
and have the conversation. And
Yep.
that's what marketing does, right?
Totally.
Marketing gets you down that path a lot further when you go out and you make those calls, you get that referral, et cetera.
Yep. Yeah. A mentor before I got into the insurance business would said some cool stuff that I really resonated from. Both my partners do too. And we've lived by it to this day. There's pull through marketing and there's push through marketing. And he always said, push through marketing is I've got to call you and compel you to take action on something that you have no idea about. It requires me to push it into the marketplace. You didn't even know you needed it. You
Yeah.
don't really want it right now, but because I'm continuously pushing it into the market, I'm going to create the need and potentially I'm going to find some customers that way. Well, that happens all the time. I mean, that's the cold call you're talking about, and it works. The pull through marketing is on the complete other end of the scale, which is, you know, uh, Michael Jordan holds up a can of Coke and everyone goes and they go buy Coke,
Yeah.
right? There's no push through. I'm pulling you into distribution, right? And so those are like the two polar extremes of the spectrum. But what you're saying is there's a middle road, right? Like I'm still maybe doing an outbound dial or an outbound reach, but because you know me in the network or because somebody knows of the people that I know, there's a higher level trust, which means there's a little bit of pull through. So there's this scale, and if you're gonna do outbound push through marketing, which at the end of the day, I think majority of us as insurance professionals, at least that's where we're gonna start.
Yeah.
Um, where are the pools or pockets where there's some trust built that at least you're going to get, it's not all the way on the other end of the scale as far as nobody knows who you are. How do we get closer to holding up the can of Coke and people are calling us? Um, and I think a lot of that has to do with your network and connections and relationships and edification and who you're connected to and uh, authority within a community and trade associations that you belong to. Do you sit on the board of somewhere, your church? There's a lot of stuff like that. But I think it has just to do with trust, right? If Michael Jordan holds up a can of Coke, there's a high level of trust. He's a very recognized figure, right? If Brett Young calls you and you've never heard of me before and I'm trying to take a shot at your insurance, they're like, I don't trust this guy worth of atom.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think that one always stuck with me, just like there's the spectrum. And even if I'm going to play whichever side I'm going to play in, it's like, where's your leverage?
Yeah.
And that's more of like almost bridging the gap. If I'm going to call you cold, if I can make the connection to somebody that you may know, immediately I get credibility, which puts me closer to holding up the can of Coke.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I don't know about you guys, but I certainly don't have the budget to hire MJ to do a
Yeah.
commercial for me.
Yeah. Well, with AI, maybe we could just
Hey,
like, make MJ,
there you go.
So
There you go. I'm guessing he might get a phone call from somebody at that point,
yeah.
but
Yeah. It might be a bigger
but
problem.
so yeah, for sure. Well, I'm curious your thoughts on this perspective as it relates to marketing. I think one of the things that people run into or don't approach the right way is their messaging in the marketplace and who they're targeting. Because at the end
Mm,
of the day, in our industry, right, everybody has to buy insurance, and that's gives us a big market of potential clients. But what I think it also does is it dilutes or could dilute our messaging if we're not targeted in who we're going after, right? Because if you're doing marketing right, you need it to resonate with the person that you're going after, and
yeah.
the more diluted, the more uh not specific that message is, the less it's going to resonate. And I think that's what a lot of people run into is they'll try marketing,
That,
they'll try branding and all the things, and it doesn't get the impact they want. But I think it's too broad, it's too diluted, right?
that's such a hard thing, man. Because I think all of us have, listened to a podcast or listened to things like, hey, niche down,
Yeah.
niche down, niche down, niche down. And it's like it makes so much sense, but like in the beginning, like I mean, not even in the beginning, but like in the beginning, you're starving, so you're
Yeah,
going to take anything, right? And then once you've taken everything and anything, now you're getting referrals that are anything and
Yep.
everything. So now you're finally to the point where someone's referring you business. But because you took anything and everything, now you're getting anything and everything. So the idea of like, well, when is it time to niche down? And it's like, I, I I haven't solved this in my head, honestly. I'm telling you, this is something we have worked really hard over the last year, but here's where we've landed that you can take anything and everything. That's fine if you want to do that. No, right? No one's going to tell you to not take a good account because it's not in your niche. But the marketing effort, whatever the marketing activity is, what is that?
Yep.
And then spend your time niching that. You might write anything and everything, but when you sit down to do your marketing efforts, like get really targeted on that. And then slowly over time, if you do it right, now you start to create, this flow of traffic that's more niche based than it is anything and everything based. And slowly over time, hopefully, if you become competent in it, the majority of what you write is in your niche. And then you start saying no to the anything and everything, or you start referring that to another agent who's maybe newer that's anything and everything. We're still working through that, man. That's been a huge shift for us in the last year on our commercial side. But I mean, that is so much harder to do in execution than
Oh,
it is in just thought, because at the end of the day, some of these accounts are decent accounts and it's not within your niche, but there's baggage that comes from writing an account that you don't know how to do. It's
yep.
like you spend so much time on stuff that you never knew was going to be a problem. And it's like there's an opportunity cost with everything, right? If I take the time to write this and I don't know how to write it, and I could make 1,000 more dials in a niche that I know how to write really well, at some point, if we span this out over a long period of time, there's going to become an equilibrium when it makes more sense to me just make the 1,000 calls,
Yeah.
right? And it's like this invisible erosion of productivity that it's a real thing. It's just, I feel like it's tough if you don't start from the beginning doing it the right way. I feel like it's even harder to change it?
Yeah. 100%. I agree with you. I want to be cognizant. Everybody, it seems like everybody out there right now is talking about niche focus and making it sound so easy, and it is not
It's
easy, and
absolutely,
most
yeah,
of the people that I've seen that have a really good niche, actually are niche focused. They didn't manufacture it. It kind of just happened. They wrote a few restaurants, started getting referrals to restaurants,
yeah,
and it naturally was born. But I think you don't have to design your niche day one. I think understanding that you want to get more targeted in your approach is the first
yeah,
step. Identify the things that you don't want to do. Like, I really don't know how to write truckers, or I don't know how to do this. I don't have the markets for that. And then just know that you're going to refer that stuff out. You're not going to get focus at all on that. Um, we've taken the approach of not necessarily getting super niched down by industry and such. We have a target market parameter that is more about who is the prospect, business owner, privately held, community based, those types of things. Do they want advice? Do they want to work with an advisor? Before we ever get to size and industry and that type of stuff.
that's
Um,
cool. That's really cool.
it's
I,
kind of
I
how
love
we've approached that.
I just like what you said as far as, what will you not do? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to say, what do you do? But maybe it's better to just start with like, okay, what are you not going to do?
Correct. That's what I think. I mean, eh, don't overcomplicate it. Just
Yeah.
know what you're not good at, and just say no to that stuff. Go do what you are. That can still be a broad swath of stuff to start. But I
Yeah.
always think about it as, let's say you have a bus, right? You're the bus driver. You've got 100 seats in your bus. How are you filling up your bus, right? Because you only get 100. And
Mm.
so, at some point, you can't, as a risk advisor or producer or whatever, you can't manage over a certain number of relationships. And that's going to be different for each person. But I think 100 is pretty solid. And so let's say that, but pick your number, it doesn't matter. You've only got a certain number of that on the bus. So once you fill that up, you're going to have to kick somebody off, and you may not proactively kick them off, but you're going to kick them off by not talking to them, by not servicing their account, by, et cetera, et cetera. And so think about it from that perspective when you're designing your business, your book of
God, it's
business.
so good. Yeah.
Yeah, take the seats that you've got and say, who do I want on that bus? And how are we going to scale to 100 as fast as possible? And there's so many
Yeah.
different analogies you can use, but
I mean, that's just, I mean, you talk about that's capacity.
Yep.
That's capacity, right? And I think that's it's challenging sometimes to see the whole capacity game when you're not at capacity because you're like, man, I'll figure that out when I get there.
100%.
But I mean, if I can be vulnerable for a second, I mean, we've run into some significant capacity issues from just writing stuff that we probably shouldn't have written. Um, However, there are levels to this game, and sometimes you've got to get to level 2 and 3 before you get to level 4. And
Yep.
sometimes that requires getting your nose bloody a little bit. So we've actually done some dispositions within the agency where we just said, okay, we've got this block of business that is not ideal to our process, our internal process. And we actually sold that block of business off.
Yep.
And it's painful. It's like, man, this is, I mean, you got increasing rates, you've got good retention, but our team is overrun. Like our personnel is overrun. And
Yep.
it's like human capital in our team is the most important thing on our ecosystem as far as like, levels of importance. And so like to put our money where our mouth is, like we had to solve the problem. And like we just weren't good enough yet to be able to say, okay, well, let's do X, Y, and Z and be able to retain it. It was like, no, we're not going to be able to build Noah's Ark in a month to be able to keep these clients. Like we have to, in order to take care of our, our preferred clients that we want, we had to be willing to let go of the clients that we, necessarily weren't the ideal clients for us. But that's hard, man. That's not fun to be able to have to do that. And it fixed the issue. But you're just watching revenue leave,
Yeah.
So, but the idea is that, well, we're putting new revenue on the books and there's a
Right. Right.
capacity for that. So
Yep.
it's like, so yeah, I resonate with that big time, man, because we probably did that disposition about 6 months ago. And when you're putting it on the board of all the potential solutions, that's not the one that's the ideal solution. But it was for us, it was the only way to fix the problem.
Oh, totally. Well, and it's interesting when you hear, folks or leaders of firms that have been through it and are now on the opposite side of it, have a book or see their teams that have grown and have the capacity issues. That's when they understand this conversation. But to your point, like
Hmm.
when you're young and you don't have a full book yet, and you're trying to hit numbers and all this stuff, like you can't see the forest through the trees, right?
Sure.
And it's easy to be like, oh, that'll be easy to do when I get there. But
Right.
and there's truth to that, right? I mean, you got to do what you got to do to put revenue on and money in your pocket. But I think just always looking a step ahead, right? Because you mentioned there's levels to this game, right? And there is. And so look at the next level and say, okay, how do I most quickly get there? Don't just keep doing what you're doing and say, oh, well, when I get there, I'll worry about it. Be
Yeah.
thinking about what's next so that you can take that next step once you've, achieved level 1, level 2, whatever.
Yeah.
Because I hear from so many different people out there that are in this boat and they're like, man, if I could just go back 5 years and I would have just thought about this a little bit differently and I would have done this and that from a book. I wouldn't have written that guy. It's everywhere. And so,
Yeah.
it's hard to see in the moment, but it will pay off dividends
Yeah.
down the road. And I also think if you're an agency leader out there, it's probably more important that you understand this concept because you're the one that's going to have to work with your team, your producers on understanding this and probably have some leeway and some grace that it might take a little bit more time for them to get there and bring on the right clients because not all revenue is equal to you, right?
Right.
And so you don't want them writing a bunch of crap that doesn't fit your company. You want them
Yeah.
focused, but
Yeah.
that might take a little bit longer, but ultimately again,
Yeah.
it'll pay off in the long run.
Yeah, like our service team was just getting crushed. It
Yeah.
was like every file they picked up, they had to learn something brand new, and it was like the spectrum of coverages and niches and markets and process, and it was just too broad. It was too much. And if it's going to be broad, there just needs to be more revenue tied to it, right? So you know, I think there's an opportunity cost of like, are you filling your time with agent type activities, or are you filling a large majority of your time in marketing activities. And I think if you're overwhelmingly busy, unless you're, man, I just honestly, man, it might not even be about where you are in the game. This might be just a truth that I believe across all spectrum, whether you have $1 million book or you've got a $20 million book. How much of your block of activity is spent on finding ideal clients? If
Mm.
the majority of your time is eaten up by agent activities that are non-marketing functions, then you're probably not targeting your ideal client enough. You're probably taking stuff that you shouldn't take. Like, okay, I'm going to spend 30% of my time on marketing. And maybe in the beginning, you spend 80% of your time on marketing.
Yep.
Whatever that block is, it's got to be spent there, because I feel like I know this happened to me, but when I was in production, I started getting all these referrals, and I was excited because I was always working on deals. And it's exciting because you're like, man, this is fun. Like, I'm getting to do the craft of being a risk advisor, of being a good agent. And the problem with that is there should always be a better client out there that you're trying to replace your book with. That
Mhm.
might not be popular, but the reality is you're trying to escalate your game, right? So even your best client in your best book right now, there is more likely a more ideal client out there, and you should be always looking to rinse and repeat. Just like everything in life, just like anything that you're looking to get better. Like if you have a world class basketball team, you're always looking for the next recruit that could be the best player on your team, right? So if you're not spending the time trying to replace the book, and you're just taking whatever's coming at you, you feel good about yourself because you feel busy. You're like, I'm finally going to do what I love to do. But it's a false sense of hope, because you're going to run into this plateau. You're going to
Yeah.
plateau this capacity, and you're going to plateau at this capacity on multiple levels: service costs, time spent, just the leverage that you have at renewal time, the leverage you have throughout the season. Do you have do you have the risk management strategy to be able to really retain that client against competitors? There's just so many factors that I just think that if you're not spending enough time on the marketing side at whatever level of game, it's kind of like this false hope, if you will, that you've made it. And I think we've dealt with it in here, like kind of the mantra within our walls is you're a marketer first. You have to be a marketer
Mhm.
first. And because we all get busy with agent work, it's just so easy. The email never stops. The tasks never stop, right? Like the phone calls happen, and they're always, it's a lot of busy work. And it takes way more genius to carve out the time that's white space to go on offense than it does to play defense. All of us can be busy all day, but how many of us have the ability to allocate the appropriate time to truly go, to truly go on offense? And I think that's a continuous challenge for even our top guys in here, and gals, to be able to have that space to continue to rinse and repeat, or rinse, replace, and repeat. Um, and I empathize with it because it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, too. I love that marketing first, and because I think that does get lost. And what's kind of interesting to me too with our industry is it's like as you build your book and you're building your craft and you're getting better at that, whether it's getting better at the marketing, getting better at working the language with your clients and all of those things. It's like once your book hits a certain point and you start to hit that plateau, right? That's when you're probably the best at doing that craft and you're now probably doing it the least,
That's what I was
right?
going to say, is if you wait till you hit the plateau, the capacity of your time is so marginalized,
Yeah.
right? You don't have the white space now. So that's why we had to do the disposition, because it's like we can't breathe. We're up to our neck, and we're just scrambling to maintain. It's not like you can hit the plateau and then go, okay, cool. Now we're going to allocate the time to do the marketing and go
Yeah.
find our ideal client. You don't have any space. You've filled up the bucket. There's
Yep.
no more room. And it's like, there's the danger. You leave yourself no out. The only out is to hit the eject button.
Yeah.
It's like, at least if you write, at least fill the bucket up 50% with the stuff you don't necessarily need, want, and then go, okay, no more. It's like,
Yeah.
cut off the capacity early. Just don't wait. Don't do what we did, which is wait until it's just spilling over the seams to where you just don't have any other choice but to just, eject it.
Totally. Well, I mean, the second you're saying yes to something that isn't going to be one of your ideal clients, let's say, is you're saying no to somebody that is,
Yeah.
because it's going to take time, it's going to take energy. And you're probably saying no to more than one of them because those that are
Right.
not your ideal clients just take more time, energy, everything that we've been talking about. And
Yeah.
so it's going to be more difficult at some point to continue to grow. Um, but I'm curious, you probably talked about a little bit of this, but you've been through this from being starting your own shop to where you guys are at today, probably have experienced several of those levels, right?
Yeah.
Think back to, I mean, and maybe it was just this recently one when you're talking about when you had to get rid of a portion of the book.
Yeah.
But talk about like if you could go back and do it again, what would you avoid or do differently as it relates to, what we're talking about here?
Um, so I would right off the gate, I would not write a certain, well, it depends on where you are. So I get in Florida, there may be some South Florida peeps that are listening to this and say, Brett, you don't understand. That's all there is down here. They're excess and surplus markets. So I get it. I understand that's a different beast. But for places where there are admitted markets writing good business, if I was to do it all over again, I think my partners would agree with this, we would not write excess and surplus business unless it was in a targeted class that we wanted to go after and or it had a certain amount of revenue attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, what happened, we're a personal lines driven agency. So what would happen is we would have personal lines clients and then they would ask for us to do commercial. And I think a lot of agents start like this. I think a lot of agents that are personal lines driven agents, and then they say, hey, can you write this for me? And it's a business owner. They write their home, their auto. And for us, we were thinking, man, that's our ideal client because they have multiple lines of business with us and they have a business. Like this is our ideal client. So in the beginning, we said, well, that's actually what we want,
Mm-hmm.
because then we can get all of it. And what we found out is that, again, I'm just sharing my opinion. I don't want to disrupt, in the comments. Somebody might disagree. That's totally cool. I'm just sharing my perspective. So if you disagree, I get it. Totally understand. That's why they paint walls different colors. But from my but from my perspective, personal lines and commercial lines are just completely different animals at scale. If you have one person and you're writing personal lines and commercial lines and you're servicing the business and you have this book of business and you're the end all be all, fine, go ahead, write whatever you want. Do life, health, personal lines, commercial all day long. Knock yourself out. It's not scalable. It's not duplicatable. And that's not a business. That's a book of business. What I'm talking about is if you want something to multiply your effort, you want something to move away from you. What happened is we started creating these relationships that had the personal lines and then the small business, but then the renewal process is different. The way that they're serviced is different. The way the management system is set up is different. Uh, the technology we have is different. They were just like complete separate businesses, and we were trying to integrate them together because it was one relationship.
Yep.
Well, we haven't figured out how to do that from a seamless standpoint on small business. It just didn't work well for us. So we found out real quick that even if someone had all their personal lines with us and had a very small business, what ended up happening is we were doing great on the personal lines, but we just weren't able to really do a great job on the commercial lines. Um, the volume at which those renewals were happening, we were doing so many small E&S renewals a month that it was like to staff it just didn't even make sense at the point because it was all manual. So if we were to do it all over again for us, it wouldn't matter how many lines of business you have on personal lines. There has to be a certain amount of revenue attached with anything that's a manual renewal on commercial. Um, and then now, and with there's agency fees and now and such to where maybe you can get around that if you're close. And there's some different ways that you could do that. I mean, I know instead of, doing it on a commission basis, you can do a fee basis. And I don't play in that game. I'm sure there's smarter people that do that than me. But the bottom line is from an ideology perspective, if you're going to touch this file multiple times through the year and it's going to be manual process, there's just got to be a certain amount of dollar allocated to it.
Yeah.
You're not going to automate you're not going to automate it like you do personal lines. And so you can't treat them as such, no matter how good of a personal lines client. And that was the book that we really had to let go of was we took all of our excess and surplus business that was under uh, that was under 25,000 in premium. And we sold it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I think about this too, even, I mean, we've experienced this over the years where, agents will take anything they can get their hands on. They're a PNC agent that's writing life and health, or they're a life and health agent that's writing annuities but doesn't really have the training in annuities in it. And what we found over time, dude, is like that's happened so long because our firm has been around a long time. We'll have clients call up and say, "Hey, my 20-year term policy with whomever is coming up for renewal. Nobody's called me. Like, what are we going to do?" And we're like, "I don't know. Like, we don't even know where that's at,
Yeah,
because it was 20 years ago, and there's not a renewal cycle, and there's not. It's just the whole thing because we just weren't. We were a PNC shop,
right.
and I cringe. We actually had we fought this so much. We would have, and you're probably familiar with this, a couple carriers that in order to or in their annual goals, they want you to sell a certain number of life policies and a certain number of this. Oh my gosh, we'd get in battles with our rep because we're like, look, dude, if we're going to sell life insurance, it's going to be with whoever we feel like is the best carrier. And your product may or may not be the best fit. But at the end of the day, we're a PNC shop. Like,
It's
that's what we
hard.
do. And we're not just going to go sell life to go sell life. Like, it gets us
Yeah.
in trouble. We may not be able to do the best thing for the client. And then you don't have model setup. So I can't tell you how many times
The model setup is the biggest thing, man. It's
we
just like you
spend
don't know what
so
you
much
don't
time.
know. If you're like, because this is what everybody, dude, I'm laughing about the life insurance. It happens all the time with
Oh
us, by the
yeah.
way.
Oh yeah.
Um, but like, you don't, you think you're like, oh, well, and I work with some agents who are, they're relatively newer agents. They're smaller agencies, but they just started their agency, and their ideology or their North Star is that, well, if I have all these relationships, the easier way to grow is by adding more products
Uh-huh.
categories, because then I don't have to market. I don't have
Yep.
to do marketing more because I don't like to market. And the easier route is, well, I'll just keep adding verticals because that's a better way to grow. And it's like that is the absolute kiss of death. And here's why. Because scaling, the enemy to scale, I think Hormozy said this. It's one of the most profound quotes that I listened to this last week. It hit me like a ton of bricks because I'm experiencing now. I could have heard it before and I was like, oh, that sounds good. But when you're in it and you hear something, you're like, oh God. So that's why I feel like I've been punched in the face 15 times this week. So the enemy of scale is complexity, right? So keeping things simple is how you scale. And then he said, but even the simple becomes complex when you scale. So his message was like, you can take something in the most simple form, add multiple locations, multiple people, personalities, and different dynamics, and all of a sudden it becomes complex,
Yeah.
right? God forbid you take something complex and then try to scale it. You have no chance. So when you're trying to add all these verticals before you're really big, you might as well you might as well, it's a kiss of death. You may move revenue in the beginning and think that you're outsmarting the process, but the amount of back end work that you're creating yourself to go back and try to fix something, I just don't know anybody that's ever done it and been successful. Like
Yeah.
you don't optimize first. You get volume in a category, then you optimize. Way too many people want to
Bingo.
optimize. Like this, everything we talked about today, it's like doing too much agent work instead of the marketing is you're trying to optimize. It's like agency owners will talk to, they want to, they'll talk to me about their profitability. I'm like, stop talking about your profitability to me. You haven't moved the needle from a top line perspective far enough yet. Like you're gonna profitability yourself out of business. Like no one's gonna want to come work for your company. Like
Yeah.
having a growth model that continually gets predictable results is far more important than how good your margins are. The PE firms buy companies all the time and they don't care what the margin is because in 30 days you can fix somebody's margin. It
Yep.
takes no skill to fix somebody's profitability in a business. It's very simple. You can do it from an ivory tower across the country. What you can't do is create a growth machine in a local market. That's why we get paid so much for acquisitions. That's why people want to buy agencies, because it's very, very difficult to do that. So it's like, don't want what you don't want. All of this comes from, we want to optimize this process way too early. Like, volume in a vertical is disproportionately more important than how many products you can offer a client.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that uh there's stages to that growth, right? To your point, where before you're going to optimize, and in this context we're saying build other verticals and add in different things that you can sell to your clients, you have to get extremely good. You have to get expert level at that one thing you're doing for clients, right? Because if
Yep.
you don't have that machine running, you're not going to be able to go out and build the next thing. And to your point, I think, because again, we have the ability, everybody has to buy these products. It's super, and auto owners has made it
Yeah.
so easy to one click sell $100,000 life policy or whatever.
And they
Um,
ask you, sometimes the client, it's so easy. They're like, well, the clients are asking for it.
yeah.
It's the discipline of saying no, even when it just shows up on your doorstep. Like, that's hard to do. It's like,
Well,
well, yeah, but they're asking me for it. I have to go out and I got to go find the market. I have to go out and I got to carve this out of my management. I mean, I have to. People are asking me about it. It's like, no, 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 no. There is an opportunity cost of going down that route versus just picking up the phone and dialing and getting more of what you're really good at.
no, and not only is it better business sense, dude. I could go on a tangent about this, but at the end of the day, you can either look at your role as a salesperson to go out and sell as many products as you can and make as much money as possible, or you can look at our role as advisors and fiduciaries for our clients.
There you
And if
go.
you're doing that and a client says, "Hey, can you sell me some life insurance?" And if at the end of the day you're going, "Geez, the last time I sold life insurance was like 6 months ago. I don't even remember. Okay, what do I need to calculate in there? I'll Google, life insurance." Like, you're not doing the best thing for the client. There are people out there that specialize in doing just that. Build a
Yeah.
relationship and send your client to them, because that's who's going to do
Yeah.
the best job for them. Now, it doesn't mean that forever you won't do that, or you won't build a team that could do that or whatever. But just for today, do what you're good at and bring the people around your client, because you know that's what's best for your client. And I'll
Yep.
argue it till the day I die that not only is it better for the client, but you may not make the short-term sale, but trust me, long term you're going to scale faster, you're going
Yeah.
to grow bigger, and you're going to do the right things. And
Yeah.
I
100% agree, man.
want to encourage everybody too, though, that again, this is levels, right? If you get good at that one thing, then what I think is important for everybody to realize, though, is you got to have somebody that's going to then own that. So
Yes.
you've got to bring in the person that you say, okay, we were, personal lines or whatever, and we're doing a great job there. Well, I'm going to bring in Brett. He's going to be the me that I was for that. Now I'm going to say, what's the next thing I need to go build? And
There
then
you
you're
go.
going to learn it, build it, or
There you
bring
go.
somebody in that can, or whatever. But you have to have, that's the only way that you can optimize that further. And what I see
Totally.
too many people doing is they don't find that person that's going to own it, and so something has to give, right? They're
Yeah.
trying to do too much. They're trying to be everything across multiple different business lines.
Yep.
And ultimately, either the business that you built everything on is going to suffer because you're not there
Yep.
and nobody knows how to lead it, or the business you're trying to build, the vertical you're trying to build next to it, isn't going to scale because you don't have somebody in place that's focused on it.
Totally.
That's how
I
you can
got,
scale multiple verticals.
and I mean, 100% agree. And candidly, like, I don't want to come off the wrong way. I'm passionate this because we've done it the wrong way. Like, already made this mistake so
We
many
all have.
times. It's like
Yeah.
we're having conversations early in the business where, like, let's buy a payroll provider so we can add
Yeah.
payroll to, I mean, it's like, well, yeah, it's easy. We have all these clients. It's simple. It's like, no, it's not. It's such an amateur,
Dude, we've all
no
been there.
disrespect. It's such an unseasoned way of thinking until you get to the point where you have scale and it makes sense to carve it out. It's its own department. You have somebody. I 100% agree with you. If it's almost like a litmus test. It's like, are you ready to add this vertical? Well, are you ready to hire 2 to 3 people to be able to own it? If the
Yep.
answer is yes, then you're ready. If the
Yep.
answer is no, I'm going to have Jerry split his time between this and that, then the answer is no, you're not ready. Like,
Bingo.
you're not there. Like,
Well,
it's too much of a drag on. Plus, the other thing is, like, what we focus on expands. And so you're
yes.
basically saying, like, you're You're spraying your focus in all these other places. Your team has no idea what you do now because they're confused. They're like, what is it that we do? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like every month we're coming up with some new thing that we're trying to offer. It's like there's no,
Yeah.
leadership is consistent, and if it's consistent, people will fall in line. But if you consistently change things all the time and you're doing all these different things to try to capture more revenue, it's like, I'm not really going to buy into this because, 6 months ago we were life insurance experts, and 9 months ago we were payroll providers, and you know, you
Yeah.
know, and I've been there, man, been there, done that, and then you got to work to gain that trust back. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. And maybe it's just one of those things you got to experience to truly appreciate because, I think, you hear people that have been through it say it and it's like, but this will be easy. I've got it down, and
Right.
but it's true. I mean, we've been in the same spot where, we started multiple different divisions for that reason at one time. And man,
Yeah.
it's been tough, to get it all aligned. I'm confident in where we're at now, but you learn these lessons as you go. And
Yeah.
there's some folks that I look back that are, earlier in their career, let's say, that I think do have it figured out. They take a lot of the advice that's out there and actually apply it, which is not what I do half the time. But
Yeah.
uh I get jealous. I'm like, man, if you could just go back and you could just
Yeah.
restart. But at the end of the day,
I
you wouldn't be in the same position you're in. You wouldn't be where you're at. So
I think it's that entrepreneurial itch that all of us have, and sometimes what we do is mundane, right? Like
yeah.
the same mentor that talked about the pull through and push through marketing, he said mastering the mundane, like
Yeah.
master the mundane. The best in the world master the mundane. It's just not sexy most of the time.
No,
It gets boring a lot of the time. You're doing it's repetitive over and over
be
and over.
okay in the
But that's
boring.
how that's how everything is. Like if you like everything that was worthy, everything that was worthy of working good at getting good at was worthy of doing it until you were bored. And so it's just so much more sexy to go, man, we could do this and we could create this. Because if you, a lot of us have that creator gene in us where we want to create something and
Why you
take
started a
something from
business,
nothing. Yeah, it's why you start a business, right? It's even building a book of business. You're taking something from nothing. And I think it takes way more discipline and genius to say no to that stuff than it does to scratch the itch, because I mean, I'm guilty of it.
Yeah.
I have to continually be like, no, 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 no. Like, dude, it's like this alter ego. It's like what
Yeah.
I know I should do and what I really want to do. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
like they are at polar opposites all the time. And I'm
Yeah.
lucky because I got two great partners and I have to justify it in order to go down that path. And usually I can't justify it. But I could see how if you didn't necessarily have that sounding board, it would be easy to just do this and then do this and then do this. And then all of a sudden you wake up 9 months later and you're like, wait a second, how the hell did we get here? Like
Yeah.
we're so far away from, where we were and what we were doing that was working well. And then you got to unwind it.
Oh, it's so true. So true. Well, man, I think we could keep going forever. I think surrounding yourself with good people is a whole nother topic that maybe we'll
Yeah,
dive
man.
into next time. But
Just like you, brother, and your meditations in the morning. I'm digging those that are listening. Elliot and I are reading meditations together, and I get his stories on Instagram, and I'm very close in the same pages of the book, which is
yeah.
awesome. So
Oh
I'm
yeah.
really liking to see what you highlight, because I
Yeah.
have a highlighter too. But
Dude, it's so
like you,
good.
man,
It's
I
it's
appreciate
almost
everything.
it's almost too hard to focus on every little thing because like your mind is like thinking about the last thing you just read because it was so good, and then you're like three
Yeah,
paragraphs down, you're like, oh shit, okay,
yeah.
go back. It's so good.
I only
So-
do like 2, 3 pages at a time because
Yeah.
it takes so much thought to dive into what he's talking about. But I mean, you're just a perfect example, man. Iron sharpens iron, and I learn from you all the time. And I just enjoy our conversations on camera, off camera. So getting around good people is just it's it's undervalued.
Right.
There's just no price tag that you could put around being around people who care about growth and want to be better. So I just appreciate you, man.
Yep. Likewise, brother. And we will do this again next month. Hope everybody
Sounds
enjoyed.
sounds good.
See
See
you,
you,
man.
buddy.